Okay, we'll make a start, and I can still see people filtering in, but yeah, we'll just get started so we stick to time. Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Shauna Lord. I'm the Inclusive Club Network Manager here at Access Sport, and welcome to this special edition of our Inclusive Club Network webinar series. For those of you who haven't heard of the network before, the Inclusive Club Network is made up of clubs, coaches and volunteers that have been supported by Access Sport to develop new social and disability inclusive offers. But today we're also joined by many of our sector partners to discuss our latest research, which launched yesterday, Building Stronger Communities. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping points. Please let us know if you have any accessibility requirements or anything else we can help you with during this session. You can either privately message myself or my colleague, Kelly Smith, who is on the screen, and we can do what we can to help you. Closed captions are enabled. There should be a button at the bottom of your screen for you to be able to turn those on. And we really encourage you to use the Q&A box today. We're going to be talking about this new research. We've got loads of great panel guests. So please pop any questions, insights, or experiences that you want to share in that Q&A box, and we'll come to them later and put them to our hosts and our panel. And finally, this session is being recorded. So if you know of anyone that couldn't make it today, or if you'd like to watch it back, we will share it with you afterwards. So a little introduction about Access Sport for anyone that isn't aware of who we are. We're a national charity who believes that no one should be excluded from the transformational benefits of sport. We support community clubs and coaches to tackle the barriers faced by underserved children and young people. And the benefits we focus on are physical and mental health and well-being, personal development, including life skills and prospects, sense of belonging, which obviously speaks to this research so closely, and community engagement. We're so excited to be hosting this webinar today and to have you all here to share Building Stronger Communities. So I'm now going to hand over to my co-host for the day, Hayley Barton, Access Sports Director of Delivery and Impact.
Thanks, Shauna. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Before I introduce our panel, I just want to give some background to this research and I guess sort of why are we here. As Shauna touched on, Access Sport work is, we aim to ensure that all children and young people have access to the transformational benefits of sport. Those 4 key benefits Shauna just touched on. We've done lots of work around physical, mental health, life skills and prospects. But we sort of noted that a sense of belonging and community engagement was a little bit of a gap for us. We've had lots of positive anecdotal feedback about a sense of belonging, community engagement over the years, but we found it notoriously difficult to evidence and just truly understand the importance of that for community clubs. For that reason, we commissioned the University of Bath to conduct some research into this aspect of our work. We really wanted to better understand the impact that community clubs are having on their communities, but also how our work impacts these outcomes. And perhaps most importantly, how can we optimize these benefits and support more clubs to do the same? I think we're pleased to say we got all of that and much more. We quickly realized that these findings are not just relevant to our work, but to the wider sector, hence why we've invited you all here today. The research clearly highlights sort of 5 key factors that help clubs create a sense of belonging and community engagement. But it also concluded that belonging and community are key to unlocking those wider benefits of sport and physical activities, such as physical and mental well-being. It's kind of triggered us to wonder, so why isn't this a #1 consideration when it comes to sort of designing programs, funding, coach education, and other advocacy within the sector? So hopefully that just provides a little bit of context as to why we commissioned that research and why we're here today. And yeah, I'm delighted to be able to introduce Hayden Morgan from the University of Bath. Hayden's going to provide an overview of the research findings, the key recommendations, a little bit of an intro just before Hayden starts. So Hayden is an associate professor at the University of Bath. He's worked in higher education for 18 years across sport management, sport development, sport policy, and qualitative research methods. A lot of Hayden's published research has explored the connection between sport and the enhancement of social outcomes within underrepresented populations. So on that note, I'll hand over to you, Hayden, and share with us everything about this research.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Hayley. Try can't live up to that introduction now. But good afternoon, everybody. Nice to finally be able to share the findings of this research. We've been sort of sitting on these findings for a few months, waiting for a sunny day to present them, and in the end, I think we've given up. Yeah, so we started this research probably about 12 months ago to the day. I remember the first site visit that we did, or data collection point, was the final weekend of last summer, before the school holidays. So we're sort of almost 12 months on with the research. But as Hayley said, we were invited, a team of us at the University of Bath were invited to undertake this particular research. And again, as Hayley sort of said, we know a lot about kind of the physical, mental benefits of sport, how engagement in sport, physical activity can help with those sort of life skills and prospects. That's very well documented, both academically and I think within sort of policy as well. But in terms of understanding how sport participation can help in terms of that sense of belonging and that engagement with the community, it is very much anecdotal. And I suppose those of us who've lived and grown up in sport all our lives can point to the fact of how that's really helped us feel connected to our communities and connected to other people in our communities. But we didn't really have too much empirical evidence or research that would underpin that. So that's really what we were tasked to do, and really specifically look at three sort of focus areas, really, or areas of interest. The first one there, to understand the impact of sport and physical activity on sense of belonging, community engagement. And I guess here really to understand how being a member of a sports club, participating regularly in sport and physical activity really help with that sense of belonging. But perhaps more importantly, to look at some of the things that impede that as well. So some of the barriers, and we spoke to a lot of people about some of the bad experiences they'd had in sport, when it came to being connected to their sports club. So that was the first thing, the impact on participants themselves. Secondly, then, to start to look at some of the processes, some of the ingredients, mechanisms, if you like, that would enhance a sense of belonging. So, how we can sort of make sports clubs more inclusive. And then finally, to start to think about the longer term. So how can these benefits be maintained and sustained, so that actually people feel connected to their sports clubs, and as a result, sport and physical activity becomes embedded in their lives. So that was kind of what we were tasked to go and find out about. In terms of the way we went about it, there were kind of three phases to our methodological approach, and I don't want to spend too long on this because this is the boring stuff. But firstly, we did a focus group interview with staff at Access Sport. We didn't report the findings of that focus group, but what we used it as a platform, really, to really understand what staff at Access Sport thought of what sense of belonging, what community really meant to them, and how that was kind of embedded or focused upon within their projects and programs and initiatives. So we used that initial focus group interview really as the basis for the later phase 2 and phase 3 of the study. So phase 2, on the top right there, was the qualitative aspect. So we identified 4 clubs in Bristol, London and Manchester to give us a total of 12, and essentially visited the clubs, spoke to a number of different stakeholders at those clubs, club leaders, coaches, volunteers, parents, and obviously the young people themselves, to really get a variety of different perspectives as to how their membership and participation within a sports club really helped to create that kind of sense of belonging. And just at this point, really, I'd just like to mention each of the clubs. So in Bristol, we visited Nova Sports, Bristol Indoor Bowls Club, Bristol Inclusive Climbing, and Stockwood BMX. In Manchester, Moss Side Fire Station Boxing Club, who, just incidentally, I noticed one of the Team GB boxers is a Moss Side Fire Station participant, trains there. So Moss Side Fire Station Boxing Club, Partington Multi-Sports Club, M31 Boxing in Partington, and Trafford Handball. And then in London, Brixton BMX, Aquila Taekwondo, Ballers Academy, and COG BMX in Walthamstow. So obviously, I mentioned all of those really just to say thank you. I know some of the people from those clubs are on the webinar today. So just to extend a thank you again for welcoming us into your clubs and giving us pretty much full reign and full access to speak to all and sundry within your clubs. You know, the research couldn't be done without you. But I also mentioned those clubs to just demonstrate the diversity of clubs that we spoke to. So I think, you know, we've got kind of, you know, climbing, you know, through to handball, we've got bowls, we've got taekwondo. So the mix and diversity of sports that we were exposed to was fantastic. And I think as a result, we can't kind of say, well, this only works in certain sports. You know, it's across all sports where we can start to think about what makes for an inclusive sports club. So so that was great, and thanks to all those clubs. So of course, as I said, we can draw some pretty strong conclusions from this research, and that was underpinned as well by our online survey, which was the third phase of the research. And again, we sent this out across the Access Sport Inclusive Club Network and got nearly 500 responses from parents, and more importantly, young people. We got a really great response from the young people involved in the Access Sport projects and programs. So again, you know, we've got a fairly robust base to stand on when we make our sort of claims. So in terms of the findings, then, I mean, there were numerous, as you might expect, but these were the 5 main ones really that I think is worth sharing. The first one, the community sport challenges the traditional idea that communities are solely defined by place or locality, and we found this really interesting because, of course, perhaps people of my generation in particular, and we start to think about what we mean by community, we always get wedded to some sort of physical location, a geographical area that we feel that we need to belong to or should belong to. But actually, the young people that we spoke to in particular saw community in an entirely different way. They saw it very much as a relational type of thing. So being connected to like-minded people, not necessarily people who lived in the same street or lived in the same town or village or area, if you like. And I think that's really important. You know, we talk a lot about place-based approaches to sport for development, and I'm a huge advocate of that. But I think it's also important to recognise that particularly young people see community in a different way. They see it in that relational way. And we heard a lot about young people feeling that they connected to the BMX community or the climbing community as opposed to their area or geographical location. Second one, the sense of belonging community underpin the wider transformational benefits of sport. Sounds completely obvious, doesn't it? And you know, got sort of common sense. But actually, it's something that we perhaps often overlook within community sport and community physical activity. And I suppose here we learnt a lot from the experiences of some of the young people in other sports that they tried, particularly young people with a disability who had perhaps tried and sampled a number of other sports, tried and sampled a number of other sports clubs, and had really felt like they didn't fit in, they didn't belong. And it was only really when they connected with the clubs that we met them at that they really felt that they almost saw it as the club as a second home, that they really felt like they belonged, that they were embedded within that club community. So I suppose, you know, we can talk all day long about how great sport is, how great physical activity is, all the benefits that it provides. But actually, unless we can get people, first of all, in the door to the club, but also keep them there and make them feel welcome, make them feel like they belong, then all those other benefits kind of go out the window. So that was, you know, sounds obvious, but it's perhaps something that we often overlook. Third one was about providing safe spaces. And I'm kind of, this is the academic in me, I'm afraid. I kind of always wonder what we mean by a safe space. You know, we often talk about safe spaces for young people. And I suppose what came through for us here was really about, it, again, being about a relational thing. You know, it was safe spaces meant kind of safe faces, if that makes sense. You know, that actually people were able to develop really strong relationships, not only with their peers, but also with adults. And I suppose we start to think about community cohesion, community inclusion. It's those sort of intergenerational relationships, you know, between adults and children, and being able to connect and communicate across generations, which is so important there. So plenty of examples in the research about creating those safe spaces for a positive social interaction. The fourth one was really probably the big surprise for us. You know, we expected to see a lot of benefits for participants, for young people, in terms of their sense of belonging. what we didn't expect was how impactful sports clubs were for parents and guardians as well. Some really nice stories there about how parents saw the sports club as a true kind of community center, as a place where they could go and meet other parents, create networks, get exposed to information, all sorts of things. And particularly for parents who had children with a disability, this was a real positive, that here was an opportunity to go and speak to other parents with a disabled child, talk about how they do things, again, open up opportunities to share information, other activities, and sometimes just to have some respite from the challenges of being a parent to a disabled child. So the impact on parents and guardians was amazing, and equally as important as it is for those who are participating. And then the final main finding really is about how we saw a number of young people really being able to feel connected to their communities, to feel like they belonged beyond the boundaries of the sports club. Lots of young people spoke to us about how much more confident they felt in the school environment as a result of their sports participation. A lot of them felt more comfortable and confident to go out on their own, into town and to sort of connect. And I suppose, one of the kind of the challenges we face as a society coming off the back of the pandemic is how young people perhaps became a little bit isolated, socially isolated, lost a lot of confidence to go outside of their rooms and outside of their homes and their safe spaces. So, we saw some evidence within this research that really underpinned how sports clubs help to develop that confidence to be, a kind of fully fledged member of society and of community. So those were the sort of the main findings, and really just to finish off, really, we again sort of tried to think about how we could provide something of use for sort of the community, really, for clubs and for people working in sport for development. So rather than presenting a series of recommendations, we came up with this idea of presenting some principles, some sort of features of an inclusive sports club. Now, what I'm about to present is nothing earth-shattering. In fact, it's probably common sense, but actually, it is all evidence-based, and again, it's one of those things that sometimes we overlook. So the first of those features is this one here. Know your participants. And I suppose, again, that's pretty much common sense, isn't it? You've got to know who's coming through your door. But I suppose what really shone through for us within the research was really understanding why that young person is at your sports club. What are their reasons for being there? And just a couple of examples from the research. We were in a climbing centre, a climbing club in Bristol, and a parent was talking about how his daughter, how actually her reason for going along to the climbing club was not to sort of go climbing necessarily, but to meet each week with the volunteer coach who she built a really strong relationship with. And sure enough, when we went and sort of observed the activities, she spent more time on the ground talking to her coach, to her volunteer coach, than she actually did on the wall. But that wasn't the point. That was, her reason for being there was to connect with other people. So we saw all sorts of examples of actually, coaches, volunteers, people at the club really understanding the reasons why young people were there. So know your participants is kind of the first, our first feature, I suppose. The second one is around kind of session planning. And I suppose what really came through for us was how it's really important to focus on opportunities for young people to just play, to just express themselves, to not get too caught up in things like technique and competition and all of these sorts of things, where actually young people can go out and express themselves, be creative in the ways in which they engage in their sport and physical activity. That was really, really important for being able to develop that sense of belonging, that sense of community to the clubs. And in particular, I remember being up at the handball club in Trafford Handball, and just watching some of their sessions there, that it was all focused on young people just getting out, expressing themselves, having fun, learning how to connect with each other through the sport of handball. So yeah, being flexible, responsive, giving opportunities for play, expression, creativity, fundamentally important for us. So the third one, again, very much focused on incremental improvement. We really found that, to be perfectly honest, winning doesn't matter, and winning and losing doesn't determine whether young people stay engaged with a sport activity or not. what does enable them to remain engaged and prolong that engagement, and then subsequently develop the benefits of sport and physical activity, was just the opportunity for them to improve themselves to sort of, you know, that sort of personal best thing. And we saw lots of this within the BMX clubs that we spoke to and that we visited, where just opportunities for people to feel connected, that they're riding around the same track with people, but doing things to their personal best, really helped with that sense of belonging and community engagement. The fourth one is about volunteers. And again, you know, all of you will recognize the importance of your club volunteers, but I suppose it's really just to underline that what we really saw in the clubs that do this stuff very well is how well they make their volunteers feel valued. And it's relatively simple stuff. It's about, you know, signposting opportunities for training and qualifications, and I'm sure Access Sport can help with that type of activity. But really just checking in with people to see that they, you know, are still very committed, understanding why they are there as volunteers, and it's just supporting them in terms of their general well-being as a volunteer as well, sort of not taking them for granted. So again, fairly common sense, but something we saw that really shone through in the clubs that we visited. And then the final one is about integrating parents and guardians. You know, when somebody turns up at your sports club, it's not just the young person that you're trying to engage with. Parents and guardians are absolutely essential as well, because of course they're the ones that bring the young people to the club in the first place. So if you can make parents and guardians feel that they belong as well, that they are supported, that they are connected, that they're accepted, you know, that's a really important step in ensuring that their young person also stays involved and connected in the club. And of course, what we also found was that parents bring with them a huge amount of resource. You know, we had you know, parents who were experts in marketing. That's what they did for a job, and all of a sudden they were supporting clubs in terms of their marketing activities, or, you know, they worked in finance, so they became involved in looking after the club finances. So parents are a great resource for your sports club, and making them feel welcome and connected is equally as important as the young people that we engage through sport as well. So a bit of an overview. Hopefully I've kept to some sort of time. I'm sure later on we'll show you the links to where you can read more about this type of work, and particularly around those features of an inclusive sports club. But yeah, that's what we found.
Thanks, Hayden. That was a great overview. And I guess I'll just take this opportunity to say, on behalf of Access Sport and all those clubs you named, thank you. I know your club visits were as enjoyable for you guys as it was for the club. So yeah, we enjoyed our bi-weekly catch-ups and all the learnings we took throughout. It was great. So now we are going to move into our panel discussion, which will be followed with hopefully some time for a Q&A. So if you've got any questions from what Hayden's already shared, or what you've read, or anything that comes up in the panel, please do pop them in the Q&A. So as well as Hayden, I would also like to introduce Jenny Johnson from Nova Sports and Coaching. We've got Helen Richardson-Walsh, Olympian and Access Sport Ambassador, and Andy Taylor, CEO of the Active Partnership. Hayden, I'm going to come back to you first, just with one question at the moment. I might come back to you again. How do you think we can encourage other academics, policymakers, funders to really embrace these findings and ensure that belonging and community become key in this area of work?
Yeah, that's a good question, isn't it? I mean, and it is the really important question, I suppose. And I think for me, it is about trying to get a variety of different perspectives on these particular issues and challenges. And I think we learned as much from the bad experiences that young people had at other clubs than we did from the good experiences that they were having at the clubs that we visited. And I think it's, you know, it's about getting that messaging across around that, you know, that sport can sometimes be more exclusionary and exclusive, you know, than it can be inclusive. And, you know, quite often young people are deterred from getting, and anybody's deterred from engaging with a sports club because they don't think they're going to be good enough, they're not going to be a good enough player, not fast enough, strong enough, and all the rest of it. So it's not a place for them. And I think, you know, almost at a policy level, it's about trying to share messages with sports clubs and with the sports community in general that providing opportunities for people to play at their personal best or to the highest level they can is one thing that a sports club can do, but to really push investment and to push a focus towards the other things that sports clubs can do. They are a real strong pillar in their community, and all the clubs we visited, had such a strong presence in their local community, that it's thinking more broadly about sports clubs and how they can also provide opportunities for a wider range of people.
Great, thanks. I think for us that's the key opportunity now, is how do we articulate that and how do we capture those things from these clubs. Moving over to Jenny. Thanks for joining us. You run Nova Sports and Coaching, a not-for-profit covering Bath, Bristol and Somerset, I believe. Feel free to introduce it a little bit more. I guess really for you, do these findings reflect sort of your experiences of running an inclusive club? And yeah, how do you see sort of embedding these learnings?
Yeah, in the work that we do. So we've got lots of different community-based clubs, and without blowing our own trumpet, these findings have just proved that what we're doing is right. And so we're so pleased to have been able to be part of the research. Hayden was actually my lecturer at university, so getting him to come along to a wheelchair basketball session and give it a go was very entertaining from my side. But yeah, it just really does encompass what we need to provide for children with disabilities in order for them to be physically active. I've actually got a quote from a parent. I hope it's okay if I read out, because I think it says it a lot better than how I could. So she sent me a message saying that life for a disabled child can be very lonely. My son, who has cerebral palsy, is the only physically disabled person at his primary school. His self-esteem was at rock bottom. He was unable to attend school camps and join in with PE lessons. To say that Nova changed his life is an understatement. We contacted Alex about my son joining the wheelchair basketball club. The team was so understanding of his additional needs and his disability. Their understanding of his special needs was exceptional, and they made him feel part of the team, enjoying something which he never thought he was able to do before, sport. Understanding my son's self-esteem and isolation at school, Nova then offered to run a wheelchair basketball event for his class. This event changed his whole school life. People noticed him. It gave him the courage to talk to other people. My son's now 11, and Nova's his main socialization outside of school. He loves wheelchair basketball and being part of the team. He also attends holiday activities and takes part in sports like adaptive surfing, which I never would have had the confidence to take him to myself. I think that just shows that being part of the club has given him confidence, him self-esteem, him pride, but also the comment at the end with the mum and what you found about integrating parent and carers is what we find is coming to these clubs and providing such a good environment for the young people adds trust for the parents of us. So then when we do more and we do holiday activities, they don't really question, oh, I don't think my child can do that, because they're like, if Nova's saying my child can do that, then my child can do that. And they wouldn't do that without us and without the support. So beyond the club, we're creating this community of confidence amongst young people and their parents and carers.
Sharing, very powerful and really hits nail on the head with this research, doesn't it? You're definitely not blowing your own trumpet. You clearly do sort of cover all of this and more. So I think from your point of view, and I think we can call you guys experts and leading by example, what support do you think other sort of community sports clubs need to kind of embrace that community-focused, inclusive environment?
It really is understanding. I mean, we know in community sport a lot of it comes down to funding. We can't exist without it, and within the disability sector everything is so much more expensive with equipment and coaches and training. So it's got to go right up to the top with policymakers and funders understanding that that one session for that one child in his school doesn't look great on paper and numbers, but actually, we've changed his whole school life and his whole confidence, and the knock-on effects of that is so important, and it comes back to the club as well. So I just think that understanding. Also, Hayden touched on it earlier, but the confidence to be exclusive within your inclusive environments, I think, is really important. We're very clear about who our clubs are suitable for. We have some clubs specifically for young people with physical disabilities, whereas others are more for young people who are neurodivergent and they need to have a certain level of physical ability to take part. And I think just being really clear with that from the beginning means that the environments we're creating are suitable for the young people. And what we just strive to do is, if someone does come to a club and we have to say it's not suitable, that we have another option for them. It's about having opportunities that are right for that young person, not just saying, oh, we're all inclusive of everyone, but actually then it not quite working and not quite creating the right safe place for them.
Jenny, yeah, some really good tips there. And I think from Access Sports point of view as well now, for a long time, creating environments that promote belonging and community has been at the heart of our work. But I think this research has shown there's so much more we can do and so much more support we can provide. So for us, it's really sort of adopting these learnings through our Changing Places, Changing Sports work, and thinking about how we can encourage clubs to sort of work towards these 5 features and sort of take those learnings from other clubs like Nova and some of the ones that were involved in this research. It's a good point to mention that we also have a playbook that sits alongside this research. So if you haven't seen it, we'll be resharing it after this webinar. And that's there to really sort of provide some practical examples and showcase some clubs that are doing great stuff out there. So we'll make sure that is shared widely. Andy, welcome. Thanks for joining us. I hope you've had a chance to look through everything. It'd just be great to get your reflections and really thinking about how this might benefit the work of active partnerships and sort of key players in the sector.
Yeah, thank you, Hayley, and thank you for the invite, and to Hayden and everyone else for this research. And first, I don't really want to follow Jenny. What a brilliant anecdote and introduction in terms of the work that Nova are doing. And you're absolutely right. People like Jenny are the experts here. People who are close enough to the ground, who are working with clubs, working with young people who are disadvantaged. I think the important thing for me is that we've got 90-odd people on this call, but we've probably all got lived experience of clubs and have had these experiences. And the research that comes out probably reaffirms what we may have already experienced and already know. So for me, from a personal perspective in a grassroots club and everything else, I felt that sense of belonging. How do we use this, though, to influence others who haven't had that sense of belonging is absolutely critical. And how do we also work with this evidence base for families and other people in communities and with communities for them to recognise the benefits of being part of a grassroots club and part of some physical activity and movement and what that can evolve to, I think is really, really important for that. My also reflections was actually back to COVID. I was working at a national governing body at the time, and I know from my experiences there that participation rates reduced drastically across all sport, but especially people in disability sport. And that sense of belonging was what was lost. That connection, social connection was what was lost. It wasn't necessarily about the participation, it was about them connecting with one another as much as possible. And you see that in wider community groups as well across that. So, and I know we're still recovering from that. Recovery and reinvent is the language that is often used. So I think the evidence base is really there about the importance of that social connection and that sense of belonging. It's just something we have to harness, showcase and share as much as possible. You asked about the role in terms of active partnerships. A lot of our work now is really tackling those who are most inactive. So those that aren't already in clubs, as an example, and those areas of inequalities in our communities. So really honing in on those areas of communities and different areas of our communities where the evidence shows inactivity is most prevalent. And this type of work really helps identify. And I think the timing is really good because the language at the moment, Hayley, is very much around health prevention. But actually, there are still far greater, wider societal outcomes of participating in physical activity and sport as well. And we can't forget that. Now, I have a firm belief actually being part of a grassroots club helps your health and well-being in the long term anyway. But if you ask a young person, why do you want to be part of it? It's not going to be because of my long-term health conditions. It's going to be because I want to be involved. I want to be with friends. I want to enjoy myself. And the language we use, I think, is absolutely critical at the right time as well.
Great. So one of the key findings is that sort of sport challenges the concept of communities being solely defined by place and locality. We couldn't have you on this call without discussing this. I think for many people in this research, sort of their sports club is their community or their primary community, and they'll happily travel to that club if they're able to do so. That's not going to be the case for everyone, of course. How do you think this aligns or contradicts or hopefully can complement the sort of place-based working model, as we're obviously seeing the sector really shift in that direction in the last year or two?
Yeah, I'm certainly not a place-based expert. I'll have that disclaimer straight away. And the language is also very new to me, and I'm still trying to understand it all myself as well. I think for me, it is very much place-based is about working with communities and creating solutions with communities. Actually, the communities creating the solutions. So it's a way of working. It's not a way of actually just going and investing in a specific community. The work has to be done with those individuals, for us, those who are most inactive, and working with them as to find out what is the solutions for each individual. And we know from a disability angle, especially, and specifically around impairment-specific opportunities, you are going to sometimes have to travel. But how do we take out those barriers which enables people to travel is absolutely vital. I was very fortunate. I worked at Aston Villa for a number of years, and in their foundation, a huge disability club, wheelchair football, everything else. And it was at the heart of the community, which was great, but people travelled in from a long distance to get there. That is fine. And how do you define a place? I don't think we have to. I think it is what a young person or an individual, even an older person, defines their place as being. It's what they feel comfortable with and their sense of belonging around that. But I think this piece of research just reaffirms what we already know. I think it's just important for us as a sector, when we're working on this type of work, is to make sure we really genuinely are listening. We genuinely are connecting. We aren't just doing it to tick a box. And I think we have moved a long, long way in that direction of travel. And research like this just reaffirms that and allows us to build momentum in those areas.
Thank you. And yeah, I think we see a real sort of complementary opportunity here. There's been a positive shift in that place-based focus, but at the same time, we want this research to highlight what community means to people beyond place, and I think it does that really well. So last but certainly not least, Helen, great to have you with us, especially as I imagine most people are quite excited about the Olympics in a couple of days. I guess as an international hockey player for a number of years, how important was the sense of belonging and community to your early engagement in the sport?
Yeah, massive. As Andy's already said, you know, we've all probably got our own experiences of that feeling, that sense of belonging within sport or not. Probably, hopefully, the former, because we're all kind of involved in sport. But yeah, for me, when I was growing up, I really felt like that's where I belonged. It was my safe place. It really was. I think one of the areas that Hayden touched on was about engaging parents. That was crucial for me and my family in particular. My mum, you know, a single parent to four of us, she needed somewhere where she could send her 4 kids on a Sunday morning or a Saturday afternoon and know that they were going to be safe, so she could get a couple of hours to herself. And you know, it was massive for my kind of, you know, well-being, the development of so many benefits that we know sport gives to us. But it wasn't just staying at that level. You know, I sit here today with all the experience of an elite level of sport. And for me, one of the fundamental reasons why we were successful was we created the environment where everybody felt like they belonged, like they had a role, that they could contribute and participate, and they were really involved and engaged in that process. So much so, I don't know if you're going to ask me a question about this, Hayley, but I've now gone on to further kind of studies and doing a Sports Psych Masters, and my research topic is on belonging, because it is imperative. It is a fundamental need that we all have. It's something we all search for, and the difference that that feeling can create is immense. We all know that, and that's why this research is being done, and from the stuff that's coming out of it as well. So yeah, thank you to Access Sport and to Bath University for making this happen.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. Yeah, you did preempt my next question. I was quizzing you this morning on your dissertation topic. I guess it's sort of, is there any difference between that elite sport and grassroots level, and where do those differences occur? But at the same time, where is it the same?
It's fascinating, actually. Excuse me. I'm literally got themes and codes all over my bed over here at the moment. I'm in the middle of doing the research. Hayden will know all about that. And the recommendations and the stuff that's coming out is really similar. Yes, it might be slightly worded differently or a slight different angle, but it's really similar. For example, you know, knowing your participants as a leader, as coaches, just as teammates, actually, what is coming out from the data, knowing who's around you, really getting to know them, understanding their why are they involved, what makes them tick, and really making time and effort for it. And so that one massively resonated. You know, kind of that need to feel like you're improving, that really is coming through as well from the elite athletes, that they want to feel like they're contributing. That helps them to belong. And actually, something that Jenny said that's really stuck in my mind is that feeling of being seen, basically, like that. Even for an elite athlete in an international team, they're one of the best in the country. If their coach or senior players don't say hi to them, or, you know, acknowledge them in the morning or as they're coming onto the pitch, it makes a huge difference. So that feeling of being seen as a person, not just a hockey player or whatever sport it is massive. That feeling of feeling like you matter to people and the world. So yeah, I mean, there's loads of stuff that it resonates from the stuff that Hayden's already mentioned. For me, at the end of the day, we're all people, we're all human beings. We all have that same need, and yeah, creating those opportunities is essential now. And actually, like you say, you know, with the Olympics and Paralympics coming up, this is almost like the best time to kind of get it out there. And when the nation's going to be ignited with excitement for sport, yeah, it's great time, great opportunity.
Thank you. I think that's really interesting what you say about just saying hi and sort of being seen as a person. It's no different to, I mean, you've been to plenty of Flyers hockey sessions. That's exactly what happens in those environments as well. So thank you. Before we wrap up with the panel, I'm just going to circle back round to Hayden to finish with him and hear a final word. So from your perspective, what difference do you hope that this research will make, and how will it impact sort of your work at the university's sort of future work in this area?
Well, interesting you say that, because just listening to that conversation there just sort of got me thinking about a whole host of different things. But I think, you know, just sort of recapping on all of that, you know, I think one of the things that's really important here is that sport physical activity is a fairly cost-effective measure. It's a fairly cost-effective tool, you know, and I suppose, you know, we have a lot of challenges in our society, and that will need an awful lot of money thrown at it. And I think there's a message there that we can make there about sport being a really kind of cost-effective solution potentially. I think there's also some stuff there about identity, you know, and you know, how we can really start to you know, because all young people, all of us, you know, all young people are looking to build that sort of sense of identity. And if sport and physical activity can play a role in developing a positive identity for young people, then that's a great thing. And just to pick up on Helen's point there about, you know, the timing of the Olympics and and those sorts of things. And it's one of those things, isn't it, that we always, every Olympics, there's always one sport that we've never seen before, or never watched before, or whatever, never done before, and that can be quite an inspiration for a young person to go, God, I didn't know that existed, and they're looking for opportunities to engage in that sport. And somebody made a comment in the chat, in the Q&A, about, you know, young people who have been turned off sport in the past. You know, how do we re-engage them? Well, you know, we have a great opportunity over the next month or so to expose young people to a whole host of different sports. I suppose the challenge for us on the other side of that is, are we ready for those people to come through our doors? You know, we see it time and time again where there's a real influx of new participants into sport post-Olympic Games, you know, inspired and these sorts of things. But I think in the past we've never really been ready for it as a sport community. That perhaps we've always carried on in that kind of very exclusive way. Are you good enough? And people sort of dropping out of sport very easily. Until we can kind of get that right, that we're ready for people to come and through our doors post-Olympic Games, make our clubs inclusive and welcoming, then we're still going to be having those problems and still having these conversations.
Thank you, and thanks to the panel. We are going to move on to the Q&A, which hopefully we'll share out between the panel. Shana, there's quite a lot. Can you filter some through for us?
I can, yeah. Thank you to everyone that's put a question in the chat. It's great to see so many people, yeah, interested in the research and wanting to know more. So I'll start with one of the first ones we got. So this person says, thank you, great and interesting presentation. I was wondering what the barriers may be for local community sports clubs in becoming more inclusive to and within its local community. They found that there's conversations about inclusivity at local level, but it's hard to get movement on it. And I'm happy to open to the panel and let anyone jump in here.
Yeah, I can jump in if you like. I think there's almost two questions there. So I think the first one is in terms of, you know, clubs being more inclusive in the first place. I think it's recognizing that they have a role to play within the local community, that it extends beyond just bats and balls and things like that. That it's, you know, there is a real opportunity for clubs to be literally community centres where people can get together, they can connect, they can share information, they can, you know, just generally build friendships. And I've seen it before in other research where, you know, the sports club kind of becomes like a pseudo job centre, you know, people, you know, for young people finding about opportunities or to access education or all these sorts of things. So I think the first thing is about, you know, clubs recognising that they do have a role to play within their local communities. In terms of actually getting it off the ground, that's a great question. I'm tempted to sort of throw a hospital pass over to Andy, really, and let him get on with it. But I think it is very much about a partnership approach. You know, you know, rather than, you know, I've used the wrong description there by, you know, let's chuck it to active partnerships. You know, I think it's for all of us really to work together in partnership to make sure that we are creating those opportunities and are, you know, sort of building sort of momentum in this area.
I can come in, Shana, Hayden has passed it on to me. So no, and Hayden's right, it's everyone's responsibility. I think firstly, I think we have to recognise it's a big job being a volunteer. You've got volunteers who have stepped into a club who is probably because they're child potentially and they want to help coach a sport and get people playing a sport. And now we're asking them to create an inclusive culture and an inclusive environment, one that is safe. You've got all the other stuff that goes on around being a volunteer. It's a big job. So that's where I believe the support is needed. And because you could feel really isolated in that role, and it can feel too big. And often if that person steps down, then that club isn't in existence. We've all been there, we've all seen it. I know there's been a couple of comments in the chat around the Sport Welfare Officer Network, which has been starting now to be fully rolled out. We've got 60 welfare officers. This was initially in response to the White Review with UK Sport and Sport England. We have 60 odd welfare officers now across the whole country, working with NGBs, but not being sport specific. And they are not there to be case managers around safeguarding, but they are there to help create the conditions for the culture that is needed to be inclusive in a sport environment. So they are now going to be some brilliant people up and down the network now that are being recruited from wider sectors as well, which is really important because sport often talks to sport, and the answers aren't always in sport and sometimes external. So we've got a real diversity of expertise, and they'll be working together, working locally to bring together these types of conversations about how do we learn and share off one another? How do we tap into likes of Nova Sports to be able to share that learning with others, to build that confidence and understanding of the importance of being inclusive? Because the really important bit is we recognise sport, physical activity, movement. The answer is different for each person at a moment in time. But the more physically active people are, the more they will step into clubs. And we do need to make sure that first experience is brilliant. Because if that first experience is negative, then they might never step back into a sport again. So it all comes back to culture, just as it would do in all of our workplaces and our universities, everything else. So how do we provide that culture? But the learnings are often already in the sector. We just got to bring people together in communities of learning and practices and share that with one another, because peer-to-peer, I believe, is the most valuable. It isn't necessarily a top-down, this is what we say you can do. Our job is to create the conditions for clubs to learn off clubs, volunteers off volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, from Access Sports point of view, we still see and hear those barriers of being around that confidence, knowledge, which way Andy just positioned it with volunteers is completely understandable. So for us, it's how can we support with that? And we're focusing a lot more on our inclusion training. How can we bring sort of sense of belonging and community into training, and actually for us now it's how can we encourage others to think about that with coach education. Let's start using that language and thinking about those things earlier on, and not jump in straight to the skills you need and different drills you can run. Actually, as Helen said, from the moment someone walks into your club, how can you greet them and make them feel welcome?
Yeah, amazing. And I think the kind of shared learning aspect of all this leads us on really nicely to this kind of second question. I think we have time for just one more. There's been so many and some great conversations, so I do just want to squeeze one more in. But this question is, what do you feel is the biggest barrier or challenge to clubs that stops a sense of belonging from taking place? And I guess this might be a great one for you, Jenny, because you do it so well, but I'm sure you're very aware of the barriers happening in other communities, but again, open to the whole panel.
Yeah, without meaning to repeat myself, I think one of the barriers is definitely that fear of turning people away. So you're not initially creating that right environment. That sense of belonging is a really I'm probably going to contradict myself here. It's a natural thing that happens once you've got the right people around. So you know, you've got to start with having the right people there, and then you see it blossom naturally. Very, very little things we do are parents that come, you know, we don't say there's a coffee table, there's some tea and coffee, go and have a chat. We just say, for the safety of the session, could you all sit in that area? You know, it might be quiet at first, but then within 5 minutes, they're all naturally chatting. We've not told them to do that, but we've, I guess, facilitated them all being close to each other, and then naturally it's blossomed into creating friendships and support networks amongst themselves. So I guess in terms of barriers, yeah, it's just having the confidence to have the right people there. And a lot of, sorry, I know I'm hogging this a lot, I make sure I tell my coaches and volunteers, you know, we do all the work behind the scenes that a sports club has to do for safety, risk assessing, knowing your participants before they sign up. You know, if someone's news coming that week, making sure you've got some basic information before they arrive. As soon as we get to a session, all the equipment's out, I just turn around to the coaches and say, go and have fun, go and enjoy the session with the kids. You know, make sure that you're clear with your communication, but make sure that you play with them and you're active with them, and that naturally creates a really positive environment. So making sure your coaches understand that that's okay, that they are there to have fun with the young people as well, I think helps.
Oh, sorry, go on, Helen. I'll just note we unmuted at the same time, Helen, so you go.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, it kind of maybe just follows on from what Jenny said, in that and somebody else asked a question about elite sport as well and what can be learned from it. And I think this is the same in that coaches understanding that this is part of their job. Like, you know, I think as a hockey coach, for example, you think, oh, I'm teaching hockey, but actually it's not. Like, that's almost like the last bit of it. It's you're there as a role model, as a leader of people. And so I think that just that initial acknowledgement, understanding, recognition, whatever it is, this is part of the role. I think that is, you know, the starting point.
No, amazing. Thank you so much. And I think, yeah, like we said, it's just so important to learn from people like Jenny, who are running the clubs, and yourself, Helen, who've been at that elite level, to be able to implement research like this and learn from people that have been through it. Unfortunately, we are out of time for Q&A questions. I just want to say a massive thank you to all of our panelists today for sharing their insight and their experience. It's been amazing to hear from you all. We will do our best to answer the questions in the follow-up email that we're going to send out. But for now, we're going to just say thank you. And I hope everyone enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. And we really want to encourage you, and you go away from this webinar, to share and think about how you can share and embed the research into your own practice and into your own communities. We will send out the links to the report and the playbook, and it'd be great if you can have a good read through of them, share them, yeah, and just do what you can to really get this message out and spread this research as far and wide as possible. So yeah, we will send everything out after this. As I mentioned at the start of this webinar, it's been hosted as part of our Inclusive Club Network. If you aren't familiar with the network, we are a national network of clubs, coaches and volunteers, all working towards the same goal of transforming the lives of disadvantaged and disabled young people through sport. The network is a space to connect with like-minded people, share knowledge and learn from each other's experience, and most importantly, to celebrate the incredible work that's being done in the communities and at community sports clubs. If you're interested in finding out more about the network, please scan the QR code that is on the screen right now. I will also send a link to it in the follow-up email, but there's details on joining the network there. We'd love to have you all part of it. And there's also some really exciting in-person events coming up. We're taking Building Stronger Communities on the road to Manchester, Bristol and London to share this research with the community clubs that, one, contributed to the research, but two, are also already doing this work on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, please scan the QR code, find out more. And if you've got any questions, please do drop me an email, give me a phone. Happy to talk all things network going forward. So yeah, that's us. Thank you very much to everyone who's joined us today. We really look forward to seeing you at another Access Sport event in the future. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much.